First of all, just a quick one about the presentation. It's as simplistic as they come because it's actually the first time I've ever done a presentation. I know I've given many talks before, but I've never used a presentation software before because it's just not been part of my style. But I thought I'd try it for this one.
No, turn them off.
Yeah. Right. In a recent television advertisement, the South African government proudly declared that we have the most liberal constitution in the world. Now, I think there's actually a couple of other countries who could compete with us for that title, but suffice to say we really do have a fairly liberal constitution. Our constitution guarantees us rights like freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and yes, freedom of speech. Unfortunately, as in many cultures where these rights are guaranteed, culture is very often not as liberal as the law. Our school systems, in this country at least, and in many others, and unfortunately this is the norm, not the exception, do not promote free expression by our youth. Now, I hadn't written this in the original article, but I feel I have to mention it. We all know about the shooting at Virginia Tech in the last weeks. The story as it has been unfolding has been revealing a person who socially didn't fit into this society, wasn't accepted, and didn't have the opportunity to express his feelings. Ultimately, it ended extremely tragically. Now, normally, when people don't fit in, that's not how it ends. And for adults especially, it tends to be easier to deal with when you don't follow the norm, when you don't groupthink. We just meet up with other misfits. In fact, programmers tend to be such a group of misfits. If you look around the room, all the people who look about as weird as me, we're probably all friends. But when it comes to school, and I remember this from my own time, it doesn't work that easy. You're not allowed to express yourself. And even when it doesn't end tragically, the mere fact that you don't have the opportunity to express yourself, I think, is already tragic, and it's having a massively negative impact on the growth of our society. We have come to be a society that espouses freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and then from a very young age do everything we can to prevent it, all in the name of discipline. So what can we do to address this? Now, the first thing is, let's get straight out of here. No free software offer, not me, not any of the others, and certainly not even all of us, can change the world's school systems. But what we can do is to create within the school environment a place where people can express themselves, and where individual thought and individual talents can be expressed. That area, for many people, have become the computer lab. And I would go further and say that this is absolutely dependent on it being free software that is in that computer lab. Because that next level of truly expressing yourself depends on being in an environment that is built for expressing and on the promotion of self-expression. That is exactly what free software is, and I say this as a programmer. It's a form of self-expression. When you're not dealing with free software there, you're dealing with closed expression, controlled expression. Exactly the kind of things that you would like to try and undo here. Now, probably many of you here have by now seen some presentations by people promoting free software in education for some or other reason. There are quite a few reasons that are typically given. People will tell you that it's cheaper, that it's easier to maintain and manage, that you're extending the lifespan of your hardware. And some will even go so far as to mention the benefit that maybe some of your computer science students could learn from other people's code. All of these are extremely important and extremely true things. There are some very powerful motivators for why we should use free software in education. But I think they ignore the most powerful and most important, which is that this may be our one key to bringing a lot more freedom to young minds that need it to develop. People often, usually, don't mention that, and I believe the reason they don't mention it is because the majority of our teachers were trained in this approach, and they don't want to alienate potential customers who tend to get very afraid if they think they have to deal with the concept of teenagers dressing up the way teenagers want to dress. Now, Offset, the Organization for Free Software in Education and Teaching, which is founded in France. It is a global organization. Like I've been mentioned, it's a sub-Saharan president, but we have membership from all over the world. We say free software in education for the sake of freedom. And we handle this through an extremely practical approach. We write free software for education. We try to produce as much free software for education as we can. Good quality free software for education. This is the same approach that Richard Stallman took with the GNU project. He didn't go and try and convince Microsoft to change their licenses. He simply went and started to write the next generation of software under a different kind of license. We're trying to do the same in the education sphere that he was doing in the operating system sphere. Now, here are some of the projects that Offset is either directly or indirectly involved in. In some cases, as funders. In many cases, we are the programmers. Many of these projects will be familiar to those of you working in free software for education. There is GCompris, which is a primary school level program which uses interactive multimedia for teaching various skills. It is probably considered the premier free software program for education. Yes, it's an Offset project. Dr. Geo, an interactive geometry program. The Free Duck Live CDs is a live CD. Unlike most other Linux live CDs, it has a very specific focus. It is filled with every educational program they can fit on there. And its purpose is to demonstrate the available free software for the education sphere to teachers with the minimum amount of difficulty. It's essentially a demonstration mechanism. Then there's gPeriodic, periodic table application, and Squeak, which many of you may well know about, which is, I suppose you could call it the 21st century version of Logic. There's also a series of web-based services we offer. Number one among those is WIMS. This is more university-level education now. WIMS is a very powerful interactive mathematics system. We also have a documentation server and a presentation repository. All of that you will see there. Wherever any of us talks at conferences, etc., we keep the speeches and the talks there so that other people can use them later. And I see I have an extra dot, but I left out the entry that was there. There's also the CVS repository for all our code. It's also cvs.offset.org. So that is my conclusion then. I was asked to keep it short, so I'm not going to keep you much longer. Freedom is not rated R. It's not an adults-only thing. There are some points in our Constitution, for example, that refer to age. They specifically say things like people under 18 cannot be held in a prison cell with people who are over 18. But there is nowhere in the Constitution that it says if you're under 18, you don't have freedom of speech. Our children have the same rights as we do. And only by encouraging them to live out those freedoms can they reach their true potential, whatever that true potential may be. Free software can't do this, but it can help. Thank you. Well, I would say that content and technology are two separate things which are hugely interdependent. You need content to make your tools have any kind of value, but you need the tools themselves to actually deliver that content. Now, not too long ago, those tools were books. As we have entered a new millennium and at the end of an era, really, the internet is starting to change that. It's becoming one new tool. But there are others. And on top of this base medium, the mechanism has to change. As we had gone from handwriting to the Gutenberg press in the book eras, I would say that we're still only touching the very beginnings of what these new mediums offer. And our tools, I think Wikipedia, which we have very informative talk about just now, it's a very great example of how it could work. How you can actually get around the lack of content or slow content problem by engaging enough people. But the catch, of course, is that you do need to have that critical mass of people before you can get that. And I think we have been unable thus far, for various reasons, to get that critical mass when it came to educational resources. And I've had spent a long time here, so I know exactly what you mean. We can't get teachers who want to contribute their work. Now, that is changing. But like any kind of change in people's perceptions and perspective, it takes time. I spent about 5 years trying to answer that question. Frankly, it's not an easy one to answer. And there are various reasons for that. I'm going to have to tell you outright, I don't have an easy answer for you. That there is definitely a need for various projects trying to improve education in one way or another to work together, both content creators and technologists. That I have no doubt about. How to foster that communication, I do not know. I've been trying to get that done for a long time, and so have a lot of other people who are a lot smarter than me. But I think there are some interesting initiatives happening. Offset has an annual meeting in France, where I was present last year. Now, this also happens to be one of the largest free software meetings in France. The interesting thing about last year, though, compared to the year before that, is that the number of teachers there had more than doubled. Now, the question is, that shows that this link of communication is starting to come to being in Europe, and I would assume America as well. In the developing world, it's a different matter, and if and how we can achieve the same thing, I don't know. What I have seen is that when I come to a technology conference, I speak mostly to people involved in technology in one way or another. When I'm at an educators conference, I speak to educators. What we are finding extremely difficult, it seems to me, is to create the kind of environments and even events where both groups want to attend en masse.
I'm Bobby Kirshan. I'm from Curricula, which is a new online site for developing collaborative open source curriculum and software. And we have been very successful in doing what you've suggested. We have over 35,000 teachers have already come and registered and contributed about 3,000 assets of curriculum. And we're running at about 1.5 million page views a month now. We're really, really at the very beginning of addressing the kind of topics that you've been addressing. There are conferences that you do bring the community, the technologists, to the educators, and we need to promote more of those. My question to you is, how do you separate between building educational software and educational content curriculum? Because creating a project to do games doesn't necessarily provide the teacher with the instructional materials to teach that information.
Well, I think you are definitely right. Yet again, there is the thing that people need to employ the talents they have. I think good people try to employ some of their talents to the benefit of the society they live in. I and most of the other people involved in Offset are programmers, though a few of us are former teachers. Not myself, but several of my colleagues. But we're developing software focused on teaching some sort of skill in a classroom environment with as much input as we can get from teachers. And like I said, it's a global thing. There are thousands of us working on this. And we're doing this, but we're writing code because that's what we know how to do. And we're trying to make this code do something useful. Now, I think G-Compris is a very good example, though it is on a primary school level, of what can be done. G-Compris is, I think, probably our most successful project. When I said the words, I could see quite a few people recognizing the name. Because G-Compris uses a very interesting approach to development. Eventually, it began as just a set of little educational games that taught some or other primary school skill, like letter recognition or shape recognition, etc. And very soon, the shift was made that turned it more into a vehicle to deliver very easy to create modules of such content. And probably 80% of G-Compris as it stands today is created by teachers, not by programmers. However, I'm very happy to hear about the kind of results you had, because I've been hoping for a project like that for a very long time. Somebody had to do that. But it hasn't, quite a few of the people who have tried have not had your success. We as programmers, we can only try and use the tools that are available to us in the best way we can.
We're an outgrowth of the Job Connect community. So initially this was to develop, we're programmers building educational materials, and it's evolved into a larger community. So we have a similar background to you, and we are actually funded by the founders of Sun Microsystems.
That is even better to hear. Offset is primarily, in the end, we're a group of programmers with a social conscience who's trying to affect some change. And the reason to work in education is because ultimately education is where you can affect the greatest amount of social change for the lowest amount of time and money investment. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in the sense of, if you can improve education in a nation, the impact that has on the total quality of life in that nation is probably exceeds any other social change you can make, barring except perhaps maybe curing a fatal disease.
One. Earlier, Premier Rasool was talking about the new technologies coming with a whole lot of associated problems. In particular, he was talking about detribalization, deculturalization, etc., etc. What you're talking about in terms of providing freedom, all of these ideas around education, have you seen people coming with concerns about those sorts of issues? What about our culture? What about our tribe? What about our things where we actually don't want people to necessarily have a sort of freedom that, for instance, something like Wikipedia is offering?
Well, I think that is a classic debate. Probably at the heart of it, I think I've made it fairly clear which side of it I stand on. I believe that a society is only as strong as the individuals that make it up.
Sorry, I'm not really asking you where you're standing. I'm asking whether you've seen these debates happening in...
Yes, I have. And like I think I tried to point that out when I said that I believe the reason why people don't talk about the potential for individual freedom when they talk about software in education is because they're afraid of alienating exactly that point of view. The way I see it, the only way to preserve cultures and people's tribes and their background is by allowing the individual within that not to feel oppressed by it. Ultimately, to me, a society is only as strong as the individuals that make it up. The more we promote individual thought, the stronger our cultural and collective cultural fort will become, even if that means the dissenting voices, even if it means that dissenting voice in a classroom.